This episode of NSCTV is brought to you by Leonora AAA, Bushrangers Brotherhood, Gilba Project Management, Geelong Firearm Courses, Hunters and Shooters Society of Australia, Ballarat Arms and Military Collectors Society, the Combined Firearms Council of South Australia, Auto Scratch, and Kilsyth Outdoor Store. Welcome to another episode of NSCTV, and thank you again to our patient supporters and our sponsors for making this possible. If you like NSCTV, then you can support it from $1 a month at nsctv.com.au. In this episode, we look at the commitments the Victorian opposition has made to shooters in the lead up to this year's Victorian State Election, and what Labor needs to do to play catch up. Okay, I've got Peter Zabradak, the NSCTV Vice President, with me. How are you doing, Pete?
G'day, Neil. G'day, viewers.
We covered effectively the introduction to the Victorian State Election a couple of episodes ago. In between, since the last episode, we've been able to secure in writing some commitments from the coalition that actually do some I think some really constructive things, and we just want to basically take you through them and then talk about what shooters can do to actually build on it, because this is the only opportunity we're going to have for quite a while to build on commitments from parties, which obviously you can only do at election time. So if I can, we'll just go to a story which is on our website, and I'll put a link to it in the description of this episode. And the things that they've committed to, the Liberal Party, National Party Coalition committed to, the first one is to expand appeal rights to shooters. So Peter, what does that mean? What's that about?
Okay, so in a nutshell, under the current Victorian Firearms Act, the way it stands, if the Victoria Police / the Registry decide to suspend the licence and seize firearms, there is no end date or requirement on police to make a decision to move to the next level, which is to cancel that licence. So your licence can actually stay suspended at Vic Pol's pleasure. Now, we have a couple of members that have been affected by this. We have one member who has had his firearms licence suspended for 5 years. We've got a couple of others that are in similar situations, but not quite as long. I think one is about 3 years or 2 years. Now, under the current Victorian legislation, you have no appeal rights whatsoever until the Chief Commissioner makes a decision, i.e. goes to the next step to cancel a licence. Now, Victoria Police know this. So what they've done is they've used this loophole in the law to give themselves the power to basically maintain the status quo, i.e. the suspension on licence holders that for various reasons they don't like very much, depriving the licence holders of having any rights of appeal. Now, we had David Hancock, the NSC's barrister, on the last episode of NSC TV, and he actually explained that somewhere between 70 to 80% of shooters who take matters on licences to appeal actually win. And the police know that. The odds are probably even higher than that. So in these cases, Victoria Police have manipulated the legal system and the power that it gives them to withhold licences, but without withholding licences, if that makes sense. Now, it's very much a sore point. It goes against all procedural and legal fairness.
The second point that we were able to get from the coalition, which was, again, good, it relates to clarifying where clarify where firearm prohibition orders are to be used, because the Labor government told Parliament that they would be used to on bikies and criminals against those activities. They wouldn't be used on shooters who have nothing to fear, but the legislation doesn't say anything like that. So our concern is that those could be used to try to really could be used against anyone that police simply don't like.
Correct. I mean, it's on the record and it's been publicly reported that we have a 12-year-old in Victoria that's been served with a firearms prohibition order. Whilst I don't know all the intimate details of that particular case, there is no way a 12-year-old is a bikie or a member of a Middle Eastern crime gang, etc. Now, recently the ABC actually put out a story which I was interviewed for and assisted on, and there'll be a lot more coming out of that. But basically, we've looked at FPOs in Victoria since they were introduced to judge the effectiveness or otherwise. And they seem to have done absolutely nothing. I mean, we're still having almost weekly, if not daily, shootings in Melbourne, and black market guns are a huge problem. And coming down again on licensed firearms owners and cracking down on us, it's not solving the problem. So we need to have the firearms prohibition orders looked at and reformed as well.
Yeah. The third point relates to what we call embedding a pro-shooting narrative into law. And by this, I guess all the problems that shooters have, which are bad laws, bad regulators, politicians who talk about guns and crime all the time rather than guns and sport, and of course the media and general public, which listens to all that and echoes it, to try to turn it around by requiring governments to, a bit like the Charter of Human Rights, where there is a requirement on the government to actually take the positive uses of shooters into account. Now, it might sound quite esoteric to the average person of what the heck is all this about, but it is about changing the story and talking about guns and sport rather than guns and crime all the time.
Absolutely. We've been demonised for far too long, and we're basically fed up, and we are basically sick of it. I talk to shooters every day, and we are absolutely had a gutful of the treatment that we receive.
You can support the NSC's legal actions by becoming a donor at nationalshooting.org.au. Okay, so the next one was to support the inclusion of shooting in the 2026 Commonwealth Games. I think that doesn't need a great deal of extra said about it, other than the fact that the current Victorian Labor government has announced Commonwealth Games to be held in Victoria, and shooting is not part of it at this point in time. So what at least the coalition has committed to is making sure that shooting is part of that. Haven't got that from Labor. So let me get into the last point now, which is the retention of duck hunting, and also putting in place a protection against political interference, which is the fact that the government not only retains duck hunting, but can't modify it, can't change it without a lot of consultation of shooting interests to take, unless, so basically, if the shooting community doesn't support a shortening of the season, then that doesn't happen. It would be great if that was the world that we lived in.
Yeah, look, in the last few days, we've seen Andy Medic from the Animal Justice Party publicly crowing on his Facebook page that the end of duck hunting is around the corner. This is a bloke that's one of Dan Andrews' strongest allies and supporters, and Andrews has relied heavily on to push through a lot of his legislation. If Medic is crying that the end of duck hunting is only around the corner, every duck hunter or every hunter, full stop, in Victoria should be deeply worried and concerned, because it won't just stop at duck hunting. It'll be duck hunting, then it'll be deer hunting, and the next step after that is public land hunting, full stop. So there will be no hunting in Victoria in the next 4 years of a Labor government if they are re-elected. Now, we predicted this, and I predicted this and wrote a piece about this a couple of years ago, and was ridiculed by some of the leaders of our other pro-hunting organisations.
Do you run a business that supports the shooting industry? Take out a gold, silver or bronze sponsorship with the NSC to get your logo on our videos. Not only do we not yet have anything from Labor that's going to support shooters at this election, but we actually put some very specific questions to them, which they have not responded to. And they were very clear, very easy for them to respond to, and they haven't. And here they are. Restrictions on hunting, which we've just talked about. Further restrictions on storage for shooters, mandatory tenancies expanded to long arms, any form of their use, proficiency testing, which is some practical testing either for accuracy or something else before you can get a license, and of course the exclusion of shooting from the Commonwealth Games. So Labor has not responded to any of these and hasn't put anything forward to say they even acknowledge the value of shooting to the Victorian economy and state. It's pretty offensive.
Very, very offensive, but not at all surprising. I mean, I recently was interviewed for an ABC story for ABC TV. The online version's already been released. And the journalist himself told me that the new police minister, Anthony Carbines, had been approached to be interviewed and had been declined. So what Labor have done is basically adopted a bunker down mentality between now and polling day to say nothing and do nothing. And that way avoid anything being used against them. Now, if that's the case and they have adopted such a bunker mentality, my greatest concern is that is a clear indication of there is bad news to come for the shooters in Victoria if the Labor government is re-elected.
Well, and it's not just the bunkering down. There was a story in The Age which appeared recently where it listed the MPs who actually want duck hunting banned, and there were about 20 plus Labor MPs.
Correct.
Now you've got 88 in the lower house overall from both sides. 144, I think, all up, something like 120 odd, I think, in Parliament overall. So that's quite a big chunk, even just off one side of the party that wants duck hunting banned. So, especially those MPs who are in marginal seats, they will just go for duck hunting ban. So that is what we're up against.
Well, looking at that list and looking at the seats, the seat of Melton, which is held by McGee. McGee is one of those MPs that is absolutely strongly anti-duck hunting. Yet, funnily enough, the state seat of Melton has the highest concentration of firearms licence holders in metropolitan Melbourne. So they are concerned that it is no longer a safe Labor seat, and it shouldn't be. Shooters should get rid of McGee, and that will send the greatest message to the Labor Party. Do not take us for granted and do not crap on us. Now, I know there's a lot of angst about trusting the LNP after what Howard did, and there's a lot of long memories and a lot of friction. And one of the reasons why we approached Peter Walsh and the Nats on this is because the Nats have a small handful of seats. They cannot afford to lose any seats at all. So what we were hoping to achieve was for the Nats to use their influence on the Libs, okay, to see the light, shall we say, and use their influence. And I think the fact that we've got written commitments on some of those things now is a good indication that maybe, just maybe, the light is on and they are starting to see it.
Yeah, I hope Mr. McGee actually updated his resume. We will probably share some love in his electorate, I think, when this election comes. So if he's watching, mate, just make sure that you know how to use Word and you're actually quite good at it. Just in terms of the coalition position, fortunately, there's always somebody else trying to spoil the party, and there is one Liberal MP who we take nothing away from what the coalition has put forward, because it's a really good platform, but they've got to bring one of their own into line. Fortunately, he is not only anti-duck hunting, but the SSAA actually supports him as well. And just to recap, in his maiden speech, he spoke against duck hunting and how it should be banned. I think he talked about how modern Liberal Party wouldn't support it. So anyway, what happened is that the SSAA went to see him, and part of their write-up on their meeting with him is that Mr. Newbury assured SSAA Victoria he was not in favour of a ban on duck hunting. And yet that list that was published just a few days ago of the MPs who want it banned included Mr. Newbury. So his position be consistent. It was consistent in 2018, consistent in 2022. We've got the SSAA saying it wasn't really that way. He didn't mean it.
It is important that shooters use the email that's on the NSC's website and send the message through, because we really need the Liberals, not so much the Nationals, because they understand their country and they understand farmers and shooters a lot better than their city counterparts of the Liberals. But we need shooters to click on that link and send the message through, because it's a numbers game. I remember when we did a similar exercise where we asked shooters to email Lisa Neville, and she was absolutely deluged. And the message came through loud and clear. So I get that there are a lot of shooters out there that remember Howard and can't forgive what happened. But it is time to try and put a foot forward And I'd encourage all shooters to click on the link and to try and use the link successfully and get the message through, because realistically, this is the best opportunity we've got right here, right now, before the election, to try and get some change, some positive change, and some differences.
Yeah. So what that red box on our website on the link that is posted with this video does is opens up, as you would have seen, an email for you, which basically has the addresses at the top. And if they can generate that email, which basically says, we think this is a great idea, we support the policy, we just need the coalition to put out a policy document to basically seal the deal, that is something that will help us, because our reach is only so far in terms of our ability to email and get the message out to the broader shooting community. If we can get the coalition to put out policy documents, that will go much broader than just what we can do. Now, if you have trouble creating that email, there are some email programs that won't quite open it properly. There is a link here just below the box which talks about what to do, which is that here are the email addresses that we need you to cover, and here's the same email, the same message that you just do a copy and paste into whatever program you've got if you're having trouble. So that's, if shooters can just do that one thing from this video, that would be a really, really helpful thing to do. Excellent. Thank you, Peter Zabate. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Neil. Thank you to the viewers. Cheers.
Bye. We hope you enjoyed this episode of NSCTV, and don't forget to become a supporter at nsctv.com.au and tell your friends about this, and don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll see you later.